to the Arvada Center for the Arts and Humanities where we were doing this rep.
That's awesome.
And that's another one where I'm directing, acting, and fight directing. So I got a lot of irons in the pot there.
Right.
And a lot of investment. And not only did we lose that, but within 48 hours, by the time we got to Monday, both Jess and I had lost the entirety of all the work we'd scheduled through the end of the year, which totaled out to about $100,000.
So a couple days.
In 2 days, everything to December 31st was gone.
Holy crap. Hi, you're listening to the Reinvention podcast. I'm Aaron Anderson, and I'm here with award-winning actor, director, fight director, and teacher Geoffrey Kent. Jeff, how you doing today, man?
I'm doing all right. I'm ready to bring this year to a close.
So you and I have known each other for a number of years, and I really appreciate your friendship. You and your lovely wife, Jessica, are also professional actors, directors, fight directors. You've been working full-time professionally in the arts for a number of years, and I think probably a lot of people don't understand how hard that really is. And so that's really what I want to talk to you about today. From that perspective, sort of the before times, the shutdown times, and what the possible hope for the future is.
Yeah. Well, before times, I think it's always worth for people who don't know what kind of freelance artists like his work like. Most artists know, but the rest of us might not. My mom certainly is always confused. I kind of try to explain to people, like, if you have a job that pays your bills, that gets a roof over your head, food in your mouth, and whatever other luxury items you can afford, and that job is a job you applied for with your skills and interviewed. And as a freelance artist, you're essentially doing that every 6 to 8 weeks for your entire life.
So you're applying for a new job all the time.
Yeah. So essentially, like all theater contracts end, right? But theater is ephemeral. It's one of the things I love about it is that you get together, you collaborate, you create, you share, and then it goes away. And then you do another one. And usually you're stacking them up. So while you're on one, you're always looking for the next, or if you're lucky to have a next, you're looking for the next after that. In the case of Jessica and I, the way we have found to make it work so that we can own a home and have some sort of stability in our lives, at least pre-COVID, was to diversify. So I fight to direct, I act, I direct professional theater, and I teach theatrical skills, stage comedy and Shakespeare primarily.
But you don't have like a full-time university or college or high school or anything kind of gig. You are full-on entrepreneurial gig work, all that stuff.
Yeah, I'm a business of myself. Right. But what makes it challenging is I'm a remora and I exist off of professional theater with my multiple skills, right?
Right.
So I require the host organism to be healthy. And when the host organism is healthy, it's fairly doable with the diverse portfolio that both Jess and I are able to do. She's similar. She's an actor, playwright, improviser, instructor.
Right.
So before the world hit the fan, we had some pretty crazy days where we would almost pass each other on the highway and be able to wave as we sprinted between our various jobs. Because I can pretty easily in a given day work in all 4 of my fields in 4 different locations.
Right. Well, and so a lot of people that I know who work in the arts live in some very specific cities, right? So they live in New York, or they live in Los Angeles, or they live in Chicago. Some very few live in DC, but they live in highly dense populations. But you're in Denver.
Yeah, that's my home.
So it's not one of the major urban areas where you can take the subway, go get the job, and come back. You're having to drive a long way.
Yeah, and also you have to crack a regular job at the big theaters near you that is fairly consistent. So whereas my friends in New York can cycle between not only all of the opportunities that exist for theater and film and TV in New York, they also, most shows, book actors out of New York.
Right.
So for me, it's more important that in the local theaters, Colorado Shakespeare Festival, Arvada Center for the Arts and Humanities, and the Denver Center for the Performing Arts, are the 3 theaters that pay a living wage to actors.
Right.
So it's important for me to have strong relationships with all 3 of those, because at any given point, only one of them has something for me, and I want to be in a position to do that thing. As a director, I work at those places, but I also work nationally to do that. And then as a fight director, I certainly work all over the country. And so I spend a lot of time at the airport, and I was at Utah Shakespeare Festival 2 seasons ago. at Utah Shakespeare Festival, I was playing John Talbot and Henry VI Part 1. Few people know Henry VI Part 1,
Right.
but John Talbot and Joan of Arc are the main characters of that play and are eternally in conflict with one another. And neither of them escape it alive. And then I was doing Merry Wives of Windsor, playing Master Ford, and I was doing Merchant of Venice, playing Aragon, one of those one scene clown roles.
Right. So you're like the character in The Dresser, right? The guy who's in the theater his whole life. Stop that train! All that. You're working. You're living in the theater. You're grinding out. But they're quite prestigious roles. I mean, they're Shakespearean roles.
Yeah, I mean, the challenge of capturing, it's Rickman who said, once that it's really doing Shakespeare is like chasing the horizon. You'll never catch it. You're just chasing it because the act of chasing it is what is so exciting.
Right.
I recently watched that Michael Jordan 10-part documentary.
Oh yeah, it was great. Right,
one of
The
the
Last
things
Dance.
And one of the things, while it was very celebratory of him, partially produced by him,
right?
I also found it to be that combination of talent and work ethic, right?
Mm-hmm.
That that's pretty unparalleled. Here's someone who has natural talent better than any player on the field, and also is the first to practice and the last to leave. And the combination of those two things is pretty unbeatable.
Yeah. Well,
go ahead.
I'm sorry. No, I was going to say you are actually living. When I first started in theater, I think a lot of people, I say The Dresser, but I mean there's a sort of a archetype of the working actor working in Shakespeare, doing these things, which is different than the person who makes a breakout role on television or something like that. It's like the what's the saying? In theater, you can make a killing, but it's hard to make a living, right? That's sort of that daily grind. So you are living what I thought was the ultimate dream, but I want to talk about sort of the reality of that. So what was that like on a daily basis? Like, talk me through a day in the life of Jeff and Jessica.
Well, I think Jess and I were just talking about what Saturdays used to be like. And for us, a typical Saturday was generally teaching a class at the Denver Center for the Performing Arts in the morning. For me, it would either be a 3-hour stage combat certification class that met from like 9 a.m. to noon.
Okay. And how far away is that from your house?
About 15 minutes. These two. The upside is I have our home, which I purchased back when I had a day job and wasn't really realizing I'd have a life in theater, is equidistant between the two major theaters in Colorado and the two biggest theaters within 1,000 miles. And I lived 12-minute drives from both of them.
Good thinking.
Which is just luck.
Yeah.
But you would go off to do that class, teach that class. Then you would dart back to make it to our Arvada Center to, let's say I would have a matinee. So I would get there, do Fight Call, and do, a production of Sense and Sensibility.
As an actor.
As an actor.
So you start the day, you get up, you go teach a class, you go across town, and now you're an actor.
Yeah, but once the matinee was over, I would then frequently jump in my car and drive back to the Denver Center to do a fight rehearsal for a show that was in tech there.
For a different show.
Completely different show, completely different company. So I would sprint back. They were doing a experimental Macbeth that I was coming in to try and help last minute. So I would rehearse with them. I'd have a 30-minute car drive between the two. I'd have 60 minutes of them and 30 minutes to get back to either do another productive performance or frequently I direct there, so I might then be moving into an evening tech of let's Murder on the Orient Express, the last show I did.
Right.
So
which was gorgeous.
That show is so beautiful. But yeah, so I would basically teach in the morning, act in the afternoon, fight direct on my dinner break, and then direct when I got back. And all of that in one day. And that's a hell of a day. That doesn't happen often, but it does happen routinely.
And then Jessica is also doing something in parallel, and you guys are passing in the hall.
Oh, all the time. And she's also a coach. So what she would often do on the dinner break is a student would also come and meet her at the Arvada Center. They'd get a room, and she would coach them on audition techniques for a little while. And that's how she would fill her dinner break. So we would carpool, but then I would steal the car. So we could kind of manage it, but we would each basically do 4 jobs a day.
Wow. And how far into the future could you book work?
I'm lucky in that fact, and I say that with due respect to the grind. Is that one of the things I realized early was I lucked into a couple of things. One is I found myself to have a proclivity to action, right? So very early on, when I've struggled as a young actor, but once someone put a sword in my hand, suddenly it was a playable action.
Right.
I didn't understand subtext or how to say one thing and mean another thing, but the idea to strike, to smash, to push, to stab, to shove, which is interesting because I was not an athletic kid in any way. It was just something about swords that brought that out in me.
Right.
And so what that did was let me cut in line at Shakespeare Festival auditions, because I might have competency with text, but suddenly Act 5 comes along and you want a Laertes that isn't going to kill the actor playing Hamlet, but is going to make Hamlet look better, elevate their game.
And that's your job, right? Your job is to make the Hamlet look good.
Yeah, I'm a ringer, right? I've been brought in to help him have a great show and do my job in my show as well. Laertes certainly has some shit to do. But what happened then is I started doing a lot more Shakespeare, and Shakespeare is often done in repertory, both during the regular year and in the summer. So the contracts are longer. So I just completed a run at the American Shakespeare Center in 2019. That was a 7-month run, a 3-month rehearsal cycle.
That was here on our coast, on the East Coast.
Yeah, it was. It was over in your hood. It was beautiful. Oh, I loved it there so much.
Well, and the director, so Sharon Ott loved you. She thought you were just a fantastic actor. I tried to talk her out of it, but she really...
Well done. We had our moments, but I liked working with Sharon.
Well, you were great. I mean, you say you didn't know subtext and all that, but you've really grown into a fantastic actor.
I would certainly say that I've aged into this skill. I call myself a blue collar actor because I'm not a classically trained actor. I was trained because I was able to get in the room early as a younger actor, be in the room with great directors and great actors, and I think I'm the equivalent of the student that just needs to be doing it, right? So I need to play the servant with no lines, make a massive choice that causes the entire rehearsal to stop when they tell me not to do it again. So instead of your teachers telling you not to do that, I'll just make that mistake for myself.
Right. Well, that is actually classical training, right? Before there were universities and stuff, right? Back in the day, you're apprenticing. You're the guy, second spear carrier, and you move your way up.
Yeah, I'm a journeyman, right? Yeah. So, and I'm still to this day, one of the first things I want to do is learn the names of the people with no lines, because I don't ever want to forget where that came from. And I also remember what it was like to have John Hutton, a resident actor at the Denver Center for 20 seasons, who I've been watching since I was a kid, turn to me and go, "Hey, Geoffrey, do you think Claudia should drink heavily in this scene or just have one
And that feels good,
drink?"
Right?
Yeah. And he's asking me that question, so I feel involved. I know John. John and I were actually just about to do a 2-hander together, which was canceled, which sucks. But John was asking me that so I would feel involved. I don't think John really was invested in the answer.
He's bringing you in. He's deliberately.
Yeah, and that's what we're supposed to do. When I direct a play, I'm like, how do I make sure every character in this scene feels like there's a reason that they're there? Because there is a reason they're there. So yeah, I guess, so what happened to me was the sword fighting got me into the Shakespeare festivals. The Shakespeare festivals got me to longer contracts. And essentially, I now pretty routinely cycle between 6 and 7 month rep contracts, which means that job search is a little further out. So traditionally, I'm always booked 12 months out. And in a good year, I'm booked 18 months out.
Nice. Well, so this last year, so let's transition out of the good times.
Yeah.
Which were grinding times, right? I mean, that's sort of...
they were hard. My body's enjoyed this rest.
Right. Well, and you're rehabbing your ankle.
Absolutely.
So what happened with that?
That's a Shakespeare-related injury.
Yeah.
You start to learn as you get older, and if you're paying attention to other actors, the first thing they usually complain about, well, there's a few things. Housing, the dressing room location. But they fight for good shoes. And you start to realize why as you get older, because you're putting repetitive action mileage on your body that is not unlike being an athlete. You start to realize when you're directing a play that maybe having all the 70-year-olds kneel to the king is not a great idea for them. But other directors don't remember that. So I was playing Mark Anthony. It's a small cast production at ASC. ASC is an American Shakespeare Center, an amazing place to see and do Shakespeare. It's a natural setting with candelabra. They're electric lights, but they're just candelabras. Right. There's no lights. There's no sounds. There's no sets. It's just actors in costume telling stories. But the story I wanted to tell was that Mark Anthony was rushing off to a battle where he thought he was going to die, and I felt Mark Anthony needed to do that with alacrity and authority. So I was bypassing the 3 steps and just leaping down to the stage floor and going on. Ultimately, a 3-foot drop, not a right. I'm not really worried about it. But 7-month run, I finally just created enough repetitive stress in that stride in cheap combat boots that eventually I kind of ruptured my Achilles. And by kind of, I mean I did. And then I just kept acting on it because to quit acting was to not have income. So I just played through the pain.
So you did that in the middle of the run?
Yeah, I did it early in the run, frankly. And we got new boots, got new insoles. I certainly didn't jump off the stage anymore. I did a much longer warm up. I was able to kind of maintain it, but it was a work-related injury that was slowly getting worse. I was growing a bone spur and it was going to become a permanent limp. And as much as I like Treasure Island, I don't really want to be stuck in pirate place for the rest of my life.
Right,
So I took
right.
this break to fix
Well,
it.
and you
But
mentioned something else. I mean, being a professional actor is in a lot of ways like being an athlete because you're on,
yeah,
right? It doesn't matter at a regular job. You do the job, and if you're not feeling it that day, you put the work off. Maybe you do a little bit, but in the theater, much like in professional sports, when the time comes, you're on.
we
And
play hurt. I mean,
yeah,
just like athletes do, and
and
I'm not
sick.
saying I can now jump on the field and compete with athletes no more than they could do a soliloquy with me. But um, we both will push our bodies to the extremes for the people watching, and we both will if we're injured continue to play because the whole team counts on you. You can't be
Did
Mark
you?
Anthony and call out.
No, did you? No, not really. Well, I broke my foot one time doing a show, and the doctor was like, your understudy's going to have to go on. I was like, you don't actually know anything about theater. You just saw this on TV because most semi professional theaters or even low level full professional theaters don't have the money for.
No. And even if you had understudies, like I had an understudy, but like he's in the cast. So the
Right.
domino effect he goes up, another person goes up, another person comes in, half of them don't know the lines and are carrying scripts and the whole play falls apart. And yeah, you're hurt. And as I get older, I'm telling you, if I was really sick, I wouldn't play now. I've pushed my body. I've at least twice in my life pushed myself too far with injury as a result that affected my ability to make a living because I
Right.
broke it. Because your job's not going to be there with you when you look for the next one.
Right.
So when I did Comedy of Errors at Colorado Shakespeare Festival, I was playing both Antipholi and didn't really have the vocal training that my teammates had in a 1,000-seat outdoor amphitheater. I just screamed my voice out to blood, and no one pulled me because no one was going to cancel the show. They were letting me choose to cancel the show. If I would like to, I could cancel.
But it was on you.
Yeah, do that with 1,000 people out there.
Right.
You know.
So before we move on, did you have because you have to be on? Did you have any sort of routine or warm up sort of standard? How would you? I always find, depending on the part, right? If it's an easy part, you can just step into it and go. But if it's if it's an emotionally demanding part, you've got to sort of get yourself into that space.
Yeah, I mean, I would say, the danger is sometimes we can be interpreted as method, right? That we become the character. And while that is not true, when I first started as an actor, I didn't do any of that stuff. My warm up was, I'd say a cigarette and a cup of coffee, but I don't smoke. It was probably a candy bar and a cup of coffee. I was like, look at all these warm up idiots. What a waste of time.
Right.
And then you get older and your instruments start to become stressed a little bit, both physically and emotionally, and you realize I do have to place myself for a show. So when we were doing Caesar and Cleopatra, George Bernard Shaw, and I'm playing Rufio, just a wise ass in the corner, which is essentially how I live my life, and I have no fights.
Right.
I can just walk into that show at half hour, talk shit until I put on my sweatpants and walk on stage.
Because the character is very close to who you are in that moment.
Yeah, but Mark Anthony is a hot mess of a human being, and I was playing him across 2 shows, and actually each show required a different warm-up. Like my physical prep for Julius Caesar was big because I had to do a lot of just big vocal work to do Friends, Romans, Countrymen, and Give It Justice. You got to effing have
the audience knows the audience knows that speech. They're not actually listening to you. They're watching.
No, they're speaking along with me until they realize 2 lines into it they don't know any more of it, and don't really know where I'm going with it. But then when I was doing Mark Anthony later, who's later in his life and physically breaking down, that was actually when I had to do a physical warm-up. That's when I suddenly had to do yoga and breath and pick a speech. I'd pick a different speech every night to just drop into it and breathe through it and re-listen to it, rehear it.
Right.
To make sure I was finding everything in it and that there wasn't more to find. So I'd basically do a mini rehearsal on one speech while I did some yoga. And that turned out to be the trick. But every show has its own warm-up, and the trick is figuring out what it is. Right?
What it is for that character in that time and what you have.
There's no, I have friends who have, the thing they do every show. And for me, it's this show I need to listen to music before this show. This show, I need to shoot the shit and get my dressing room mates to laugh is what this show is all about. When Talbot was leading a warrior, I would gather with my warriors before every show, and we talk about how we're going to kick the shit out of France.
Right.
You find your own. Each show demands its own rituals, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, that's perfect. I think that's a really good way of putting it. I dig that. All right. Mm-hmm. So in the before times,
until this year.
So you're in the before times. You're working. You're coming up with your own sort of process. And you're grinding it out. You're living the life. You're doing everything that we all wanted to do as working actors. And then, right, when stuff shut down, it didn't shut down like slowly. It came crashing down in a period of a few days.
Yeah, it was a garage door. And if you were and you just felt like you sprinted to the safety of your home as it slammed shut behind you.
Yeah.
I never have, nor would I hope to ever see that level of complete elimination of your career over a weekend.
The description I heard today it was like looking both ways before crossing the road and then getting hit by a submarine.
Yeah, both. And there's two submarines heading opposite directions.
Right.
Like I remember because when you're in rehearsal, we were in a rep rehearsal, so we'd opened up Murder on the Orient Express, which I had directed, and then we had opened up Midsummer Night's Dream, and I was playing Bottom in Midsummer Night's Dream. And then we were rehearsing a third wonderful play called Small Mouth Sounds, which is essentially a silent play. There's about 4 pages of dialogue in the whole play, and it's about a bunch of people.
And this is back in March.
Retreat.
This is in March.
This is March of 2020.
Right.
And we were going to open on Friday. So Thursday, we were doing previews Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and we could tell stuff was going on. But like, I'm not as tapped into the news when I'm in tech. Like
right.
I'm basically eating, sleeping, and going to the theater, walking the dog, and that's about it. So we knew something. We knew it was bad. We knew what COVID was, but we didn't realize how prevalent it was, where it was going. And then so Thursday night became no talk back because the audience, there was only about 20 people. Normally we see 220, and previews are normally sold out. But people who had tickets were already realizing, I don't think we want to go to the theater. As I've described to many people, I'm in the business of gathering old people in small spaces for long periods of time.
Next to each
other. It's
a
really bad pandemic business model.
Yeah, and yet the theater has lived through many pandemics, right? I mean, this is not the end of us.
Hell, we've lived through plagues.
That's right.
And Shakespeare wrote during it. So I think we're going to see a great renaissance. That's my belief. But in the moment, we got closed on opening night. So
you go to the theater and there's a show going on, and you look out and the crowd is sparse. And you're aware that something's going on, and then what? You got a call?
And I think we were thinking what was going to happen was we were going to get through opening and then see what happened, right? And we just got to open, and we'd already canceled the opening night party, and then we were going to do a toast backstage with just us. Then we canceled that, and then we got the call Friday morning that we were going to shut down for 3 weeks.
Okay, and it was still 3 weeks, right? That was the idea that we.
And they kept us on contract for 3 weeks. They paid us to stay home.
That's cool.
Which they did not have to do in any way, shape, or form. And few theaters did, except for where they were contractually obligated. But this theater was like, we'll keep paying you.
What theater was that? Let's give them a shout out.
This is the Arvada Center for the Arts and Humanities, where we were doing this rep.
That's awesome.
And that's another one where I'm directing, acting, and fight directing. So I got a lot of irons in the pot there.
Right.
And a lot of investment. And not only did we lose that, but within 48 hours, by the time we got to Monday, both Jess and I had lost the entirety of all the work we'd scheduled through the end of the year, which totaled out to about $100,000.
So a couple days.
In 2 days, everything to December 31st was gone.
Holy crap.
Now, some of those were gone, meaning they said, we don't know yet. These are all maybes. And then they fell as we got closer. Right. But they were all pushed to the we don't know if we're going to do them pile like that. And that included I was directing Macbeth at the Illinois Shakespeare Festival. We cast it, and we were in last round of designs. That was shelved. I was teaching at the National Stage Combat Workshops. That was shelved. I was doing a 2-hander with John Hutton, Woman in Black. That was shelved. And our future rep that would have started in December, we already knew was going to collapse down. So December was gone. And then I was teaching 2 classes at the Denver Center. Those were gone. And then my DU class in the fall didn't book because enough students weren't coming back to justify the class. And those are just the big ones. And then there's all those little $500 gigs here and there that you have, one-shot visits, master classes, gone. And for Jess, it was the exact same thing. Every play, every writing, it was all gone. So it rocked us so hard that I don't think we did anything for 4 weeks because we were just trying to figure out.
Right.
What do you do when the host organism dies or at least hibernates suddenly?
Right.
And you've saved nuts for the winter. We saved enough for a season, but we don't have enough in the bank for 2 years to not work. We're artists.
Right. Well, and also you said you were diversified, and you were, as an artist, you were diversified, but the entire field collapsed.
Yeah, that's the thing. I kind of felt like teaching would still subsist, and it has, but it has struggled as well. And a lot in many places, it's where it's really hit as adjunct, which was my hustle. Because adjunct's all I could do, because I can only teach one class a term, and it's got to be in the morning because I got to be free in the afternoons and evenings for rehearsals, and it just wiped out adjunct work.
Oh yeah. People cut the jobs that they could cut, right? And if they have,
and the people who have jobs are now teaching 2 jobs for the one job they have.
Yeah.
And not only are they teaching 2 jobs for the one job, they're teaching to Zoom and they're teaching live in many cases at the same time, and try and serve that many masters in one teaching class.
How do you process that? I mean, emotionally, how do you process that? Just your whole world
barren, man. It was really dark. Not in terms of a self-harm way or being unhealthy necessarily, but there was an inability to sleep, because it went pretty quickly from going, this is going to be a bad 2 weeks, to a bad month, to a bad quarter, to a bad year, to knowing that 2021 ain't going to be a cakewalk. And when you see sports teams that can afford the studies to say how long it's going to take, saying it's going to take 5 years until they have a full stadium again, even if we get a vaccine. Well, my small union theater company that is bootstrappy is not anywhere near competitive on that level. So you're looking at going, I'm late middle age, and can I reinvent myself to a new career? And I don't want to. Right. Like, I worked really hard to get the one I have. It wasn't easy to get here, and I don't want to now just suddenly go into the business of X, whatever whether that business is peripheral. Like, a lot of actors I know have gone heavier into recording, audiobooks work. That's out there certainly. Podcasting, although it's not exactly lucrative, as we all know, unless you're a top dog in it, but it's still, it fills the time and lets you feel like a creative artist. So I think my wife and I were looking at, 1, what are we going to do to sustain our income level? And 2, what are we going to do to feel like artists? And the fact remained that we knew those were going to separate to a certain extent.
So you must be looking at mortgage and bills and trying to just figure out what the bare minimum and where the
and I think
bottom out.
The best part for Jess and I is that we live simply because we've chosen a lifestyle that's a low income lifestyle that makes us happy, right? Like, I think the thing that we all should hope for in our life is to have a job that brings us joy and happiness. We loved our jobs. We still do. They're just not there right now. So our mortgage isn't super high, and our savings were fairly robust, and our monthly expenses aren't particularly crippling. So we were able to, our monthly, the nut we need to make a month to live is sustainable on unemployment while it's working. Right.
What about we're not
health insurance?
Health insurance you're getting for the union.
Well, that's great. We get our health insurance through our union as actors, but our health insurance is a union, and our union itself is deeply, deeply hurt by this, right? So that means our health insurance, which for anyone who doesn't know, Actors Equity, the way you're in health insurance is by booking weeks, and the amount of weeks you work qualifies you for 3 months, 6 months, or a year of health insurance.
And you can't bank it. You can't say
no. You can bank like a little, like they'll look back 18 months for 12, that kind of system, right?
Yeah, but you can't bank it. Let's say you have a 5-year period where you work really hard. You don't suddenly get 5 years worth of health insurance after that. Yeah.
And nor necessarily should it, because I understand that, right? Because really what's happened with Actors Equity is anyone on an equity contract is contributing to health, but if you didn't book enough weeks, those contributions stay with equity and go to those of us who've made them. So it's a weird, it's not a pyramid scheme, but it's definitely like it benefits those who work the most. And in 2019, I booked 54 weeks of equity work.
Nice.
By overlapping 2 long-running jobs by 2 weeks. But that still means come July 2021, I'm out. Like, I booked that much, but it'll still be gone. But our union, because we're not getting any income, because we pay money, or we pay into our union when we're working, and we pay dues. But primarily, it's the 2.5% of your check that keeps equity going, and Broadway especially, right? Well, when all that goes down, our health insurance went from $33 a month, which is laughably low, but appreciated as struggling artists, to $100 a month. So it tripled. While we were on a contract, meaning I was committed for a year and my health insurance next month tripled. It also then they had to up the weeks. So now I need to work instead of 19 weeks to get a year's worth of health insurance. I need to work 32, or rather I need to work 16 weeks every 6 months.
And this is all while the theaters are all closed.
And there is no work, right? So we're all invariably getting bumped off, because equity is also creating a standard that's very, very high for performances to be okay, trying to figure out where liability goes for us as performers, right? I'm in a play, I have a stage kiss. How are we going to handle that with COVID? Are we cutting it? Are you expecting me to do it? When one of us tests positive, does the entire cast get to quarantine? Or there's a lot of questions with how to handle live performance in a pandemic. And the answer is the safest thing to do is not do it, which is what predominantly most of the theaters chose to do, certainly for 2020, is the union theaters just went, it's not worth it. Not just dealing with the union, but like also just dealing with the safety of the audience, the safety of their crew.
Right.
It's just becomes a loss gain. There's no gain there.
So let's dig ourselves out of this hole a little bit.
Yeah, let's go for it.
Now you have been working, right? I mean, you've been doing. I mean,
a little bit
online.
Yep.
So what is that like? Theater online.
It's crazy. It is crazy. If you think that theater is a collaborative art form, the reason that most of us, I think, certainly me, is not a painter or a sculptor is because I don't want to go crazy in my studio alone with a lump of clay. It's just not how I'm wired. I need to be in a room where I feed off the energy of the people I'm building, not unlike a sports team, right?
You watch their body language, you hear their breathing, you hear their laughter.
And more importantly, Aaron, I look them in the goddamn eye, and I can make a connection with a human being by looking them in the eye. And I cannot look anyone in the eye on Zoom.
No.
I can look in the camera so you feel like I'm looking you in the eye.
Right, but
or I can look at you, but that's it.
Right.
And it sounds really weird, but the entire structure of acting is about that connection. And in some plays where we talk to the audience, it's compounded because it's the same thing there.
Right.
And when you create theater on Zoom, you also remove the audience's input completely. So I'm holding for a laugh that I have no idea is happening.
Right.
And even if it is happening, it's happening in the houses where it's happening, but the other houses that didn't think it are funny are just waiting for me to talk again. So you got this tin can string problem with your audience, and then you've got just the tech problems of performing online, that anyone can miss an entrance if their Wi-Fi goes down.
Oh, yeah.
And
you have redundancies and everything else.
So what my wife created was this marvelous piece of holiday theater about 9 family members. We cast pods, me and her in one screen, a family with a child in another screen, a couple in another screen, and then 2 soloists. We had 9 actors in 5 boxes. And we were able to do a live play that was on Zoom. So we weren't denying that we were on Zoom.
Right.
We were able to do a live play where we had redundancies of how to get back on if we got booted. We had ring lights and box lights and boosted Wi-Fi signals. And we had the Arvada Center building props and pulling costumes and using our own clothing. And we were able to build a 70-minute play. Jess used the breakout functions in Zoom. So Acts 2 and Act 4 were choose your own adventure. When the actors left, you could pick which one you wanted to follow.
That's really cool.
And whichever one you followed gave you a slightly different play, though the story was the same because Acts 1, 3, and 5 were seen by everybody.
That's genius.
But Acts 2 and 4... You had 3 to choose from each way, which meant you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. You have 9 different ways you can see the play.
Yeah.
And you have 12 scenes, of which you only see 4 every night. And it was like Sleep No More and House and Garden, which is a play, even Noises Off. But she also wanted to feel live. So she began the show by talking to people as they logged in and like acknowledging them. And then we had improv sections in the scenes where we had asked the audience questions on chat because the given circumstance of the scene was that it was online. And so we were able to create as close as possible to a live theatrical experience. It was financially successful. We employed 5 union actors, 4 non-union actors. We had about 100 to 150 people a night log into Zoom to watch this. And the audience was all over the country. I had one of my friends watch from Vladivostok. We had people watching from Wales. We had people watching from Canada. And we had people watching from every time zone all over the country because your audience for Zoom theater is huge. You just got to convince them to come see it. But there's you don't need to buy a plane ticket and come see me to see my play. So that was pretty cool. Ultimately, you could even cast actors from anywhere in the world as long as you can survive on the time zone you're shooting. You could do it. So it was really fun to create some live theater on Zoom and feel a rehearsal process and a run. So we could evolve over a run as opposed to a canned one shot only.
I like that so much better than the type we've been doing. What's the She Kills Monsters?
I thought that turned out pretty cool.
It's
visuals.
Okay. Yeah, it's okay. The visuals you can, but it's like a lot of the theater then becomes like a poor man's television, right?
That's what it is. I call it cheap TV, and I'm like, we can't compete with Netflix, man.
Right.
Like that stuff is produced and better than we can compete. Our friends will watch it.
Right.
Our subscribers who just want to will do the I bought a ticket to support you, but like you can't exist on that. You need to have a commercial product that people are willing to pay.
Well, it's got to be something. It's got to be something that doesn't feel like less, so that as you're watching it, you're not always aware of what you're missing.
Yeah,
right.
And I think part of it is the truth of acknowledging the format you're in. Like you could do Hamlet on Zoom, but he's got to know he's on Zoom. He can't pretend he's in a scene with people who are in other boxes. It's not the Brady Bunch. It doesn't work. But Shakespeare can be put in any concept. So I could totally put a Shakespeare play on a Zoom screen.
Right.
Jess and I can drop green screens, and we could get if we get vaccinations, we could have 2 quick change artists with masks on, and we could do a 2-person play with green screen spin-in chairs and I want to do one where I have like, I'm on Zoom on 2 devices, and this one over here is on, and that's Iago's inner monologue. So I'm talking to you, but when I'm in the scene, and then when Iago talks to you, he turns live to this screen.
Oh, that's cool.
I think there's ways to keep us going, and I also think this format of online theater is not going to go away. I mean, it's not like it didn't exist before the pandemic, but if you were immune compromised and still want to see some theater, I can do Christmas Carol this way.
Before the pandemic, I worked on a number of plays where they were trying actively to try and figure out how to make it interactive online, right? They'd project things on the screen, or they would have some sort of live interaction with some text or something. Everyone was trying to figure it out because they knew that, everyone walks in the theater with that thing in their hand, right? They have the phone, and they were trying, and as you say, theater's an interactive thing. So they're trying to figure out how to do that, and now everyone's been forced to do it.
Yeah, well, to be in the theater while I'm watching you live and expect me to pull up my device and interact with it, it's just a much different experience than I've found than you're already on your phone watching it.
Right.
So I already know you're there. So if I say reach in the upper right-hand corner, tap on chat, if you want to give us some baby name suggestions, we'll discuss them with you. And then the audience feels like this is really happening. And what we're trying to do is enhance the connection that this is live, you are live, and the symbiotic relationship of audience and performer is necessary for it to be theater. It needs to be a shared human experience. And to me, theater needs to be live for that to happen, because a tripod recording of my play, I've got a full tripod recording of Murder on the Orient Express. No one but my mother or aunt wants to watch that.
Right. I mean, it's at a distance, and it's not nearly the same thing.
And there was professionally produced filming of theater, but it was in pre-COVID time that they filmed it. Like they ran it up. They did a full run in front of it. The One Man, Two Governors, great example. Fully produced with a live audience. It's amazing. I enjoyed it, but I still could pause it and go to the bathroom.
Right. Well, and also they have the camera. They have a close-up, right? I mean, you act different in a close-up. You can get a more emotional thing than you have.
And they have to act to those different things. Whereas, so really, live theater over Zoom, 1 has to acknowledge it's on Zoom, 2 has to have massive redundancies, and 3 has to have an opportunity for the audience to really truly believe that it's live.
Right.
Even if whatever tricks you want to use to do that is fine, but they need to believe that on the other end of this camera is someone right now sweating and doing a quick change that they just barely made.
Right.
There's an energy to it that is palpable, and my
question, a danger to it.
Yeah, and when we created this particular piece, it was a family comedy. But, they lost the patriarch. He's dead. And we don't say why, but we're clearly we don't talk about COVID or pandemic, but we're clearly apart saying it's not safe to travel. Like, we're allowing that to be filled in by the audience, whether or not that person died of that or not. But then in the comments at the end, when we would do chats, people are like, I lost my father this year.
Oh, shit.
And I can't tell you what it meant to me to watch people tell a story about loss and hope when I feel like I haven't had any. And when we get people so I did not think we could emotionally affect people through this form.
But you're saying you did.
I know we did, because I don't think they weren't just my friends. These are complete strangers which is what theater does, because it creates this shared empathy and human experience, which is why it has survived all these things and why it can't be defeated, because I believe that it will adapt to the mediums available to it in the time it's in. And what we have right now is this. And I think when we move back to stages, which I think we will, I think this will still exist. I could go live to any classroom and do a show from my home. All the actors loved it because they could, 1, wear pajama pants, and 2, when the play was over,
wearing them right
they
now.
were home.
Right. Well, and everyone also, there's some more equipment, right? I have lights here. You have lights. Mm-hmm. You've got a screen behind you. You're talking into a nice microphone. I mean, there's some stuff we didn't have before the pandemic that we now have the ability to shoot into edit.
we're geared up at this household. Let me tell you, man, I got ring lights and box lights and microphones and shock absorbers, and this one's on a boom. Like I'm an actor with a boom.
Yeah,
what
man.
the heck, It also does orc voices, but I haven't figured it out yet.
Oh, it's a gaming mic.
Oh, it's a game mic.
Oh, that's cool. That's cool. All right, so let's. This is great, man. I really appreciate it.
I enjoy talking to you about it.
So, by way of wrapping. So we went from the before times to the terrible times to the maybe what the future might hold times. So now if we can jump times, right, to leap o'er times, to if you could go back in time and give yourself some advice about this career that you've come into. So let me preface this.
Yeah.
We talk to, when people want to get in theater, we talk to them a lot about the transferability of the skills and, right, you're going to learn how to interact with people, you're going to learn business skills, you're going to learn the absolute nature of a deadline, you're going to learn interprofessional, work, interdisciplinary work, all this sort of stuff. But when the whole bottom fell out of everything, there was some truth in that. As you know, you can get jobs in other fields, but it is a whole other field. And everyone else in every other field at the moment is also trying to get work in these other fields.
Mm-hmm.
So, so some of the things that I think we told ourselves in the pre-COVID times, I think were partially right and partially lies. But with the ability to now know what the world can be at its, not at its worst, but at its, at a fairly low, at a fairly low nadir. If you could go back and talk to yourself about the future, this path that you were going to take, is there any advice you would give yourself? Or, to rephrase the question slightly and answer either version, the people who listen to this podcast, both of them, are they're artists who are trying, or people who are entrepreneurial, trying to make a living in this new gig economy, trying to figure out, as you said, how to reinvent themselves. A lot of us got into the arts because we love the arts, and then you realize I have to make my mortgage payment. So how do you make all these things come together? So there are people right now who are in the exact same boat or some similar boat. Do you have any insight in any way, shape, or form that you would give your former self or anything that anybody's listening now?
I think it's a profound question because, of course, ultimately there's always that parental fear that you can't make your kids learn your mistakes. Like they've got to live and do their own mistakes.
Well, you can hit them. You can just keep hitting.
You definitely can. You can make consequences happen. So, I can only retcon my personal self so far, but I certainly know that when I say I'm blue collar, I mean, I have a high school diploma, right? That's what I built my career off of, was tangible, tactile, real physical skills that I could bring into a rehearsal room, not diplomas.
Right.
Which I learned pretty quickly had nothing to do with getting hired, right?
Right. Can you do the job? Are you good?
Yeah. And the rule I've always said is I don't really care how you got in the room, meaning short of breaking in illegally, but you've been cast, you're in this play. Are you going to make the most of it? Are you going to make the most of the opportunity you have? And I don't mean overdo it, overact, try to steal the play. I mean, literally, are you going to come early to rehearsal? Or are you going to leave late? Are you going to observe? Are you going to politely ask questions? Are you going to use the opportunity to watch other artists at work and see if you can learn from their mistakes while you watch them make them, and learn from their victories and go, how did that work? So, but I would say that one of the things that it's easily missed if you want to have a career in the arts, certainly as a stage actor, is that you need business skills. And I don't mean just balancing your goddamn checkbook, I know that that's hard too, but that's not the level I'm talking about. How to promote yourself, how to present yourself online, how to communicate with businesses. So I have no idea how to do all that. And I've kind of learned it. I certainly read Dale Carnegie, and did my best to navigate rooms. And some of that was natural skill that was in the way I interact with the world, that extrovert part of how do I connect with people? Because that's what I wanted to be as an artist. But I really wish I'd known more about the simple things of taxes and marketing and how to present yourself and how to find opportunities to get on stage, because it's not all just going to the goddamn audition, So that's one of them. And the other advice I have, which is partially because it worked for me, but I always tell young actors when they ask me, is one, there is a level of this that is a calling. If you had a great time doing this in high school, that does not mean it's good for you as a career. In the same way you can play football in high school, that doesn't mean you necessarily want to go to the NFL.
Right.
And theater can be in your life whether it pays your mortgage or not. Right. So in my 20s, I did community theater and I really enjoyed it. I was quite happy with it.
Well, and it feels it's a whole different gig, right? Doing it because you're with your friends and it's a social activity is a totally different thing than grinding it out.
It's hobbyist versus profession. You may like ultimate frisbee, but that may mean you play in a pickup league, or it may mean that you push yourself because you want to become a national champion of it, right?
Right.
And really, to make a living on the stage, you're going to need that level of that Michael Jordan level of drive. In absentia of talent, at a minimum, you're going to need to be able to control the things you can control, which is be off book before everybody else, be early, be kind, be prepared, like those Boy Scout principles, right? But for me, it was diversify, right? So the way I got in the room as an actor is as a fight director. The way I got in the room as a director was because I was an actor and a fight director that was collaborating with all the departments at these theaters already. And then they went, well, we should just let you look at a whole play.
Right. And you already know what the stage looks like and the lighting looks like. You've clearly already learned these things.
So for me, I can get into theater as an actor, I can get into theater as a director, I can get into theater as a fight director. So I have 3 different ways to get a job at different theater companies, which allows me to diversify my portfolio. As you discussed earlier, when your whole portfolio collapses, that doesn't help me very much. I forgot to diversify into fast food delivery. That was not on my list. But but for young actors, I think you have to choose your calling, but I always am reticent to suggest anyone specialize in the age when you're 21 years old, right? You should, if you think you can't sing, learn to carry a tune. If you think you can't fight, learn to do a basic parry and fall down. If you think you can't do Shakespeare, learn how to do one good speech. Because my friend Larry Hecht used to say, if you can do Shakespeare and you can carry a tune, you'll do Christmas Carol, you'll do Summer Shakespeare, you'll do a spring musical. That's your health weeks and that's a living.
Right.
So the trick is to, like I very early on went, well, I can't really sing. And of course I can. I just can't sing as well as those kids could. And because when I was measuring myself against them in undergrad, I was like, well, I'll just back off because I will never beat them. Not realizing that there were parts for me in musicals that aren't their skills. They're my skills.
Right.
There's always an acting role in a musical, even one that sings their way through it. And it's the same reason there are roles in Shakespeare for people who are also doing the musical that summer. I've had them in the Shakespeare play. They're new at it. We pull you through and you build those skills, and maybe next time you'll get something bigger. So the importance of knowing that you should know how to do basic tap, whether you think you're ever going to be in a tap player or not. You don't need to be able to do a solo, but to abscond from learning something entirely, to decide before you've learned something that you don't think you need that skill.
Because you're not going to be the best at it is irrelevant.
Yeah, because it's not that kind of competition, because we're also individuals and we're going to fulfill different things. And one of the things I learned as a director was I started bringing in all my best friends to audition, but it didn't mean I could cast them, because you still have to figure out what's right. And that made me feel so much better as an actor, because I stopped thinking I wasn't as good as the person who got it. I just wasn't right for it according to their lens. Even if I can speak to myself and say, I'm right for that part.
Right.
I could still, I knew when I was chasing Cassius at CSF many years ago that I was right for it, but I wasn't. They cast a really talented female in that role, which allowed me to also realize, they were going to code that role that way, and I can let go of my competition of that role. I can be supportive of that actor, and I played Octavius, ended up having a great time. Then years later, playing Mark Anthony, I've got an Octavius standing next to me who's teaching me things that Octavius can do that I had no idea.
Right.
So we all learn from each other, right? So that I think, but for me, if I was to go back, it's stupid, but take a fucking business class, and
entrepreneurial business class.
Yes, that level, because you're going to be your own business. You yourself are a business,
right? And
the other is to diversify your skills and not make a decision too early about what you think you're going to need. I wish I knew more. I'm way more interested in European and American history now, because of my work as a theater artist requires me to know it. So, but I could have maybe not just skipped all that stuff when I was younger and maybe loaded some of it in earlier.
Right. So first in the room, last out at rehearsal, which is sort of the opposite of a lot of people I know who act. They don't, or who want to act. They don't actually do any work until they get cast. And what you're saying is that's not such a great idea. I
don't really understand it. Like, as you get, the older actors you meet are memorizing before rehearsal starts because they know it takes longer. Like, I use memorization as a line. When I was in my 20s, I could learn it instantly. When I was in my 30s, I could learn it overnight. And now I'm in my 40s and it takes weeks. And Mark Anthony is not a role. I can't memorize both roles of Mark Anthony in an 8-week rehearsal process and open cleanly off book and know what the F I'm doing, right? So you have to prepare, and you have to also be flexible in your preparation. It's like preparing for war, right? Like you have to make all these plans, but once it encounters the enemy, which could be your scene partner, your director, your playwright,
or whatever
your fight director,
right.
You have to be able to bend and manipulate what you think you've discovered to meet what everyone else has discovered, and trust that the director knows what the whole story is, and trust that if they're editing you, it's to the behest of the play,
right?
Which is more important than your character.
Well, and I think that advice is also useful for people even outside of theater. That idea of don't shortchange yourself right away. Let the market decide what it is that you're going to be doing, right? And
Olivia Colman just said in an interview last week in The Guardian, she was like, "Take the role seriously, not yourself." Like don't get airs because you have more lines. It doesn't really mean anything. That's right. Not what it is. And also, as actors, we don't get paid by the line. We're all getting paid the same. So can't we all just work together? Right. But yeah, I think you're in control of that. Like when I see someone audition and they don't know their piece very well, I'm like, this audition, you signed up for this audition like 3 weeks ago.
Right.
Why would you then take this as an opportunity to show me you're not prepared? I'm not saying you can't have a fuck up. I mess up. Like right. Theater's a life of mistakes. We don't get to yell cut. I get that. But I can tell that you learned that in the car. And that seems like you're telling me that's how you'll rehearse why would you think I would then think you would rehearse the play differently if I cast you?
Right.
That makes no sense.
Yeah.
So you can control your prep. You can control your timeliness. These are human things that are doable. Well, and then on the day when you can't, we forgive it because you've earned it.
Right. Do the best you can, but actually do the best you can.
Yeah, and then you earn the bad day that we all deserve to have.
Right.
But if you spend your bad day points every day for the first 2 weeks of rehearsal, you're telling me something.
Yeah. First impressions matter, and
they really do.
Yeah.
And the funny thing about being in theater, I don't mean to interrupt, but is that first impression day happens constantly, right? If you're doing a play every 8 weeks, every 2 months, I enter a completely new room of a completely new group of people. Often when I went into ASC, I had not met a single one of those human beings before, besides Sharonot, who I'd fight directed an opera for 15 years ago.
Right.
So how you're going to be on, you got to learn names, you got to shake hands, you got to yes and, you got to not talk about yourself, you got to ask people questions about themselves. And that's a pretty good rule for your first day of rehearsal, is to learn everyone's name and have asked everybody something about themselves.
Well, and I would say this, so this studio's in a consulting company, and I would say that those things that you just said are also true in any business environment.
You and I talked about this once many years ago, when I was in management and I was in this insurance reference company in my 20s, traveling the country, meeting vice presidents, setting up servers, and training employees to use it. So I was like teaching, being artistic, right, and dealing with finance and tech all at the same time. And they sent me to a management company. They're like, well, what's your objective with this project? What is in your way that is preventing you from fulfilling this project? And how will you get what's in your way out of your way so you can fill your project by deadline? And I was like, that's an acting class.
Right.
You just taught everybody in here an acting class.
It's exactly the same thing. They're just different words.
Yeah. And I was on the precipice of my 20 years. Like I could have stayed in insurance because those skills we talked about as an actor were working for me in business. Like I was successful. I had way too much cash in the bank. It's how I bought the home I live in now as an artist. But I wasn't happy.
Was that true? And I mean, that's my last question. I mean, because when you used to come out to Chicago all the time, and we'd hang out because you were on the road all the time,
constantly.
What was it? Silver Plume?
Yeah, that was a company.
That's good. That's my memorization right there. That's it. I'm done for the rest of the day. But you were on the road all the time. And you were meeting new people and you were doing all those things. But you had more financial security. And if you hadn't gotten out of that, you probably wouldn't be in the same financial straits right now.
I wouldn't. But obviously you can't. That's only one quality to measure what brings you joy.
Because you still got to do the job every day.
Yeah, you still got to get out of bed and want to go. And I think the hardest job to leave is not a job you hate. It's a job you like because you don't love it.
Right.
And why it took me all my 20s to leave Silver Plume, because I was making money hand over fist.
Because it was good enough.
Yeah, and I made a deal with myself, which is what if I could use this job as a shelter, and I could ultimately on the side hustle of the evenings and weekends and using my vacation days, make 6 months, book 6 months of work and look at it. And if I put that money in the bank, could I pay my bills? That I would quit. And the day I did the math was right about before I became a certified teacher in the Society of American Fight Directors, is I got 6 months of stage combat teaching and improvisation work and murder mystery work and Ren Fair work. And that's enough money. I don't need this job anymore. And that was the deal. So I quit. I didn't even like sleep on it. Like I was doing the math on a spreadsheet in my cubicle and I went, I did it. I'm going to go do it before I don't want to think about it.
That's actually that's actually what I started this podcast for, was to try and get at those stories, right? How do you reinvent? How, if your job is good enough, but you have something else. The original, somebody told me I should call this "Don't Quit Your Day Job." Because it's
How
true.
How about reinvent
right?
your day job?
Yeah. But that's it, right? You don't. I mean, if you still have to pay the bills, but if it's not fulfilling you, you gotta sort of side hustle until, and then. But you did something brave then. You then made the leap.
Well, you had to trust that 6 months was probably as far out as I was ever going to look as an artist. So because I wasn't looking for a full-time teaching job at university, I was wanting to be a performer. I was like, that's security. And the fact that over the last 20 years, it's grown from 6 months of security to 12 to 18 months of security shows you that that's about as far as you can plan in professional theater, because they need to pick the season and they do it a year at a time.
How did that feel? How did that feel when you quit emotionally?
I'm really proud of that moment. And I look back on walking in my car, and one of the things that was so interesting about it is I worked with those people for 9 years full time. And I never spoke to another one again the day after I left. And it wasn't because I didn't like them. It's because our friendship was based on the fact that we were cohabitating as workers. We weren't, none of those friendships, and some of them were as long as that 9 years, ever carried beyond once in a while. I'd see someone would be at a show and we'd be like, hey. But that decade of my life gone and no friendships from it. But my theater friendships,
right?
Other artists that I've worked with, Robert Wesley, Dale Gerard, were in my wedding party. You know,
we've been friends for 20-something years.
Yeah, and like we don't create things very often. In fact, almost never. But those tendrils run deep in the arts because it's a shared empathy of what it is to make this stuff, and that it takes a lot of heart to do it, because that's why we're here.
So when you quit, did you feel a sense of elation? I mean, what was that actually feel like, or was it scary?
I think it felt, to me at least, and I'm trying to remember something that happened when I was 29, and I've lived a life since 29.
Right.
But in the last 2 decades, I would see it felt like closing a book and opening and starting a new book, like finishing a journal and going to the next journal. Or in Lord of the Rings, you've wrapped the Fellowship, and we're moving into the 2 towers. And I think the pandemic is a good metaphor for 2 towers.
So we're just waiting for the return of the king.
I'm just waiting for those Uruk-hai to turn around, because they got no armor on their back, Aaron.
That's true. That's true. Well, on the third day, look to the east. That's all I'm saying.
But like, I wouldn't undo any of that. And like, yeah, it would have given me more financial security. But 20 years of misery, who would I be? You know, I'd love to own a boat and an RV. Don't get me wrong. But I don't want to hate my job or be unhappy at my job
for
50 weeks of the year so I can spend time on my toy for 2 weeks. Like,
I have the best man at my wedding, a fantastic guy. But he's a millionaire. He's a multimillionaire. And he used to, he wanted to buy a camera one time.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, well, why don't you buy this really fancy one? He was like, no, because I'm not going to use it all the time and I'm going to feel like an asshole. The thing is, and he said, the thing is, you still have to get up in the morning. You still have to do something. I mean, it's still how you fill your day. Whatever it is, it's how you fill your day.
Yeah. And I'll tell you what, this pandemic really does make you reevaluate and try and understand what do you want to do to fill your day today.
Right.
Where do you want to put your energy? Because when you're always swimming, when I'm doing 54 weeks in a 52-week year and fight directing and teaching around it, it's hard to stop for a second and go, is that the direction I want to be headed? Is that what I want to do? And I get to take this time to go, I need to direct more and act less. My body needs it and my brain needs it. And I actually feel more rewarded by orchestrating the creation of a piece than leading it from within it. I still enjoy them both, but I've had time to think about it. And I'm more inclined to read a book that's going to help me direct something than help me act. So it's not that I feel like my acting doesn't have still room to evolve. It'll evolve until no one will let me do it anymore. But my directing, it has plenty of room to evolve, and I see a massive horizon line for that. So that's
I like
what
the
you take this
horizon
time to
line.
do.
I think this
Yeah.
last conversation about you quitting the job at Silver Plume was worth the whole interview. I mean, for me personally, it really was. Because
You were there too. Like I remember,
remember.
we were
No,
friends at the time, and I had lots of disposable income and frequent flyer miles for
yeah,
days, and
but it wasn't
but
worth it.
I wanted to make theater,
Right.
and I didn't even know why, but now I know, because being removed from an audience meant that I need to be a storyteller. Whether I'm a director, actor, or fight director, if I'm going to tell a story, I need someone to listen to it, and I need them to be there.
Right.
And that's the next stage, is to figure out how in 2021 we mitigate this and continue to
Right. Well,
find a
and
way to
maybe
make
it's an
theater.
opportunity that if it's good enough, if you're happy and you're just surviving, that maybe this is an opportunity to look to the future and think, what do I want to try? What is my
Yeah. With 20 years left before I probably want to heavily decelerate my career, I'm like, what do I want to achieve? As a Shakespeare actor, there's a few I got to knock out first that I haven't gotten to sink my teeth into yet, and I feel ready for. But but my list of plays I want to get my hands on is far longer.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Hey, man, this has been fantastic. I appreciate it deeply.
I love talking to you, and it's been a tough year, but it's nice to end it with a little success and feel like I believe the years ahead can't be what the year behind will be, which means there's hope, and hope is a great motivator.
Oh yeah, yeah. No, what would you say? The horizon. Look to the
Yeah,
horizon.
it is. It's the Lord of the Rings, and it's Shakespeare, and it's just chase something that's worth chasing.
Yeah.
No,
that's cool. Happy holidays, my friend.
To you as well.
And to everyone listening, go to reinventionpodcast.com. There'll be transcripts of this and other free resources. Dude, it's so nice seeing you.
Yeah, you're the best, man.
I'm just gonna hit off here, and then we're gonna keep talking.